the town of Barrington had really, really low turnout for their municipal elections, and they were trying to figure out how to get more turnout. And so the town administrator came up with this idea to have an actual election that the people under 18 could participate in, and mostly younger groups even, and they vote on what day trick-or-treating is on. They vote on like what their voting sticker is or what the new truck is that they just bought, or, you know, and it's issues-based development, and their voter turnout went up 50 to 70% depending on what data you use, because the kids were like, oh, I need to go vote to their parent or their caretaker.
I'm a stakeholder in this, right?
Yeah, but it actually matters. Like I'm used to like the throwaway ballot.
You're listening to Granite Goodness, the podcast where we interview New Hampshire people making the world a better place.
Oh, Susie, where are you going now?
My name is Andy DeMeo. This episode was sponsored by and recorded in Treeline Outfitters in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Today, I'm speaking to Allison Ryder. Allison is the Executive Director of New Hampshire Civics, the only organization in the Granite State that teaches civics for free to people of all ages, political views, and zip codes. We talk about Schoolhouse Rock, learning from kids about the democratic process, deciding on pizza as a civic exercise, American history, and a million other things I hope you enjoy on today's episode of Granite Goodness. We're here today in Treeline Outfitters, and you haven't been here before, right, Allison?
I haven't been here. I have seen through beautiful social media targeted marketing many, many instances where I should walk into this space, but this is my first time actually taking them up on that.
Okay. Well, I mean, maybe this entire interaction was just a targeted ad for you. Like the podcast, this is all just a ruse to get people into Treeline Outfitters, which it is, of course, and you should go, because this podcast is sponsored by Treeline Outfitters, which I will say in the intro. Anyway, so glad to have you on here. We were connected through, I guess you could say, a friend of a friend, Heather McNeil.
Yes.
Who is a real piece of work, just the nastiest, most wonderful, fantastic person. I met her through the University of New Hampshire Entrepreneurship Center. Funny coincidence, the previous guest was their former director, Ian Grant, who Heather would know and may have mentioned. But one day, I saw that she got a new role at this organization called New Hampshire Civics. And I did a little reading about it, and I thought that sounded like the coolest organization in the whole world. Oh yeah, I'm wearing my... I just promised Allison I would take my headphones off, and she said, no, you can keep them on. It'll make me feel like this is a real podcast, which it is. I'm going to take them off. But yeah, when I first got the idea of doing this, I mean, you were, let's just say this. People ask me, and by people I mean my family, they say, oh, you're doing a little podcast. And I say, yeah. And they said, well, who are you getting on? And I said, her name's Allison Ryder. She's the director of this little organization with a massive footprint called New Hampshire Civics. So you are the guest, no shade to the other guests, that I like to tout around to people. I'm so excited that I actually got you on here. I can't believe it. And anyway, I'm pumped. I'm pumped to have you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Andy. And I have to admit that I'm a relative newbie to the role. So I came in officially on January 1st, but since it was a beautiful holiday called New Year's Day, I started my work at New Hampshire Civics on a holiday. So I officially started on January 2nd. So I'm really excited about this organization and the chance to talk to you a little bit more about it. And in the beautiful New Hampshire spirit, I was actually at UNH for about 18 months when Heather was there. So we were in different offices, but we got the UNH vibe going on here as well.
Right on. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I should have a checklist of things that I ask all the guests. And, this is a New Hampshire oriented, themed, focused kind of project. And I feel like I should ask people, hopefully not in an exclusionary way, because that's your whole thing. But like, state your New Hampshire credentials. Like, when was the last time you chugged maple syrup? I've never seen anyone do that in my life, and I've lived here my entire life.
Absolutely. No, it's more the sugar on snow.
That's
is
right.
Is a New Hampshire way for sure.
Yeah.
But if I had to name my New Hampshire credentials, like, I might put your other guest to shame, being born and raised and educated in New Hampshire.
Wow.
So, and very like small town New Hampshire.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
Ian is a transplant. He's a fake.
Yeah.
He's not.
So,
really from
and
here.
Heather, I mean, she's definitely, I mean, she's Derry, but that's like junior Massachusetts. I'm like Boscawen, New Hampshire. People who've lived in New Hampshire their whole life have never heard of Boscawen, New Hampshire.
Well, I have, because my wife's grandfather, I think, lives in Boscawen, or lived in Boscawen. But there was some like family homestead there for a while.
Likely, yeah. I mean, my parents were the weirdos that like moved to Boscawen. Like, most people who live there were like born there for like generations. And my parents were like, fun Allison side note is that I get to say that my parents met at the state hospital. So, which is a fun fact, which is true. It's 100% true. But my mom was a psych nurse. She graduated from the state nursing school and went to work at the state hospital as a psych nurse, but she lived in Nashua, and my dad came up to New England College because you get to ski free at NEC. And
that's amazing. What a perk.
What a perk. And so forget the education, just get to ski free. And so, yeah, he was a caseworker at the state hospital. So they worked the 3 to 11 shift and then decided, you know what? Let's get together, let's start a family, and let's move to Boscawen.
Let's lean into Boscawen. I love that. I always love hearing the origin stories, but that's a pretty fantastic one. I didn't know that Heather was from Derry.
Yeah.
I'm from Londonderry myself. So
yeah.
Junior and Londonderry is, sorry, Londonderry people, like a junior Derry.
Yeah.
So really it's junior Massachusetts.
Absolutely.
To use your parlance for Derry.
And here's one more thing to blow your mind. So my mom, 100% French Canadian, which means like lots of aunts and uncles and cousins.
Yeah.
And so one of her cousins, which, you know, it makes me feel special, but let's be honest, I think one set of aunt and uncles alone had 18 children. So, you know, we're talking like...
It's more than a few.
We're talking like probably 30 cousins she has, but one is Andy Susie, who was the...
Are you kidding?
Yeah, so...
You're kidding.
No.
Andy!
Yeah, that's
my God.
my nan, so my maternal grandmother's sister. That was her son. So
man, my face is like beaming right now. I said it's not a video part, but like, what, you know what's, I kind of want to have him on as a guest because he retired.
Yes.
You know, a couple of years back, and you know, like, what an impact.
Yeah.
that guy had on me. I mean, I would, the whole thing, like, I was a Lancer music, drumline all 4 years. We went to all these things.
That's
did
crazy.
Roses, you know, the whole shebang. All my friends, like, I'm a band. You know, I am a scion and a proselytizer of the Londonderry High School music program all the way. I can't believe that.
yeah,
This is meant to be.
yeah. So that's the that's how deep these New Hampshire roots run right here.
That is, my gosh.
less than 1 degree of separation from probably every single human being that lives in this state.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. That's pretty great. You reminded me. I mean, my wife. You know what? No. We got to stay on task. This is a good segue. 18 kids to talking about children.
Yes.
Because that is kind of what we're here to talk about. New Hampshire civics. Can you tell me a little bit about? I've done some, like, I'm familiar with it, but, you know, for those who aren't listening, well, what I said to Ian last time, maybe I could keep this as a device. He's very into entrepreneurship, so I asked him to give the elevator pitch for himself.
Yes.
And this weird scenario people always fixate on, where you're in an elevator for 60 seconds with someone and you decide to make conversation with them, which I don't know who would do that. I mean, I feel like you would do that, but I don't know. What do you tell them? You say, hey, we're in this elevator, and they say, oh, man, I wish someone would tell me about civics education for children in New Hampshire.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point. And, you know, the segue is also the fact of how much Andy touched your life. And so,
That's right.
when we work with within students, so we serve kindergarten through 12th grade. I like to say, 5-year-olds to 18-year-olds is
Yeah.
our primary audience. And we hope and strive to be the champion of civics education in the state. We recognize that at New Hampshire Civics, that unfortunately we've seen a drop-off in civics education, across the country, not just here in New Hampshire, but definitely across the land. And we're seeing the impact of that. So New Hampshire Civics strives to make sure that we can change course on that and get back to a space where, and I'm of the age to be remembering like Schoolhouse Rock and all of that type of
I was
stuff.
going to ask you about Schoolhouse Rock.
Schoolhouse Rock.
I mean, they're the go-to example for, if you ask the average person on the street, particularly average American, I feel like, and you say, civics education for kids, word association, they say, I'm just a Bill going down to
Absolutely.
Capitol Hill and whatnot. But all those things are still like, I watched a lot of Schoolhouse Rock, and it was even a little before my time, but the quality of that program, I feel like has really held up, and for better or for worse, a lot of the things that they teach haven't really changed that much.
Yes.
But yeah, so you're new into this role, right?
I am, yes.
What's something now that you maybe wish you knew when you started? And usually it's after a long time, that I get the chance to ask someone that. But tell me about some reflecting.
Absolutely.
Like how's it gone? How's it, things you like, anything like that?
I mean, I think that what was aware of, Andy, but not to the degree in which it has become crystal clear, is how much our educators are expected to teach
Sure.
their students within a relatively short period of time. And obviously that is more acute at the younger ages you go. So when we're looking at the entire climate of, let's say, K through 3 civics education in New Hampshire, we really can't ask that more content be added.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, again, I've never been a classroom teacher. I work in adult learning more so, but like, we can't sit there and say, we need to do a whole other curriculum block on
Right.
civics when they're already doing math and reading and spelling and art and recess and all of those things, right? And so we have to really think innovatively about how to get civics back into our classrooms. I would say, we're really lucky at the high school level where, again, a student could take a civics explicit class. But again, there should be ways that we can fold it in. And so I think that there's a real opportunity here for us to not have it be a one and done.
Yeah.
As someone who's seen this work, for example, around Black history. So I used to be on the board of the Black Heritage Trail. We don't see it having a deep impact if we just talk one time about this during Black History Month.
Yeah.
And so the same thing's true for civics. We really need to figure out, and I think many are working to figure out a comprehensive way to fold civics into pretty much anything you're doing. Because the reality is civics is a part of civics. Without civics, nothing exists.
Right.
I mean, we don't solve the housing crisis without civics. We don't, we don't improve STEM education without civics. Like, we need civics for our entire society to function. So it's really imperative and incumbent that we find a way to get that back on track.
Yeah. I mean, that's as good an argument for more civics as, anything. I mean, I find myself saying something similar about kind of the sustainability stuff. That's kind of my purview. That's what I studied and kind of what I do now. So that's, or purview or bias, you might say, right? Like, I see all things through the lens of, how does this relate to, environmental sustainability and whatnot. But you really could do everything through, like, it really is all civics.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have a planning board that can look at, I'm on my town's conservation commission.
Yeah.
That's civics.
Right.
Like, so even environmentalism or sustainability efforts, like, you need laws to be passed or regulations
Sure.
or incentives for businesses to be done. And I know oftentimes we overlook the role of government or the role of the public sector in promoting that. History at this particular juncture is saying the vast majority of change has occurred and been spearheaded through government incentive or government regulation around cleaning up our waterways and our airways and things of that sort. I mean, my last nerd out moment was the fact that when I was getting my master's degree, I remember analyzing how much air pollution was addressed through essentially incentivizing businesses companies to reduce their emissions. And it was like, hey, if you put these filters or these buffers or whatever type of technology that is way beyond my smarts in place, and it's going to cost you millions of dollars, but we'll cut your tax burden by that %. And then, so those who found that there was a cost benefit analysis to doing that did do that. And then the smaller ones who couldn't afford to likely weren't putting like the same emissions out.
Right.
But we needed laws to be passed, and we needed that incentive to be put in place through the government sector. And so therefore you needed to understand how government worked to engage with that.
Yeah. And that outcome, I think you could really describe as, let's just say this. What I love a lot about talking to people like yourself and, all these other folks who are doing really fantastic work, maybe on the surface, it doesn't seem, super sexy or like super flashy, but it's incredibly important.
Yeah.
And it takes time and focus and there's so many great people out there doing it. And the example you just gave of this thoughtful regulatory path that, was the collaboration between, government stakeholders and industry stakeholders and, engaged citizens, I'm sure. And like it doesn't just happen.
Right.
The civics, I feel like, is the framework for all these things to engage and to arrange for optimal outcome. I mean, even you're giving examples in civics. I'm not trying to make light of it, but it's kind of like even getting pizza with your friends is civics.
Absolutely.
Like you decide, you vote.
Absolutely.
Like the way that we engage about all these things it's all civics. I'm going to keep saying that for the rest of this.
It is
episode.
all civics.
I feel it's like the opposite of a tinfoil hat, but like it is all civics.
It is all civics. And it's really upstream though, Andy, like that, to your point, like it's not, we have to be able to strike the balance. We're not sitting here at New Hampshire Civics saying that we shouldn't put energy and effort into addressing sustainability challenges in the state, that we shouldn't be looking at housing, that we shouldn't be looking at, I don't know, a multitude of other things, substance abuse challenges, whatever, right? Like that's obviously very critical needs that we need to be having addressed in real time. And I don't know if you've heard this really terrible analogy, but it's the only thing that's coming to mind was like the babies in the water. Have you heard the babies in the water one?
I've heard the babies don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. I don't know if that's...
The babies in the water is like you walk by this river or this stream or whatever, and you just see like babies floating in the river. Oh. And someone like goes and like, oh, there's a baby in the river, and they like pull the baby out. And then you just keep pulling babies out of the river. And that's all we get kind of like in the habit of, or the cycle of, is like we're just like, oh my God, there's so many babies in this river.
Yeah, from crisis to crisis.
And then, but we know it goes upstream
right.
to see like who keeps putting the babies in the river.
Yeah.
And like I like to think that New Hampshire Civics is doing. We're trying to go upstream.
Yeah.
We're trying to ensure, because like even the business or the industry that you were talking about, like they still have to know how to engage with the civic system.
Right.
My other fun one is like, you could literally never want to engage at all in our civic system. You may never want to run for elected office, and that's totally cool. But imagine you are a biomedical engineer and you find a cure for cancer. Like you have to know how to engage with our civic system to get that through the FDA, to get funding for it from the government. Like you have to have that basic understanding. Otherwise you're giving your entire gift away to someone else to have to negotiate that for you, because you don't have the knowledge on how to do that.
Right. Or worse, give it for free. No.
I know.
That's kind of a joke.
We do want the FDA to approve it though.
Yeah, no, I mean, my father-in-law is, he does, I'll have him on and he'll butcher me, but he has worked in the marketing and sales side of chemotherapy products. So he works with companies and they develop really niche drugs for obscure, rare kinds of ovarian cancer. And, pharma gets a lot of flack and a lot of it's, deserved, sure. But he gives me a perspective that I think a lot of people don't see of like, he always says, you don't understand to develop these drugs. It's millions and millions and millions of dollars. And, no one else is capable of doing it for better or for worse. And it really is, he speaks very highly of the FDA. He says, well, they have these rules in place. This is why these parts of it work really well. These parts of it, may be better for this group, not good for, but like he studied American history, and he's great at his job. And I think we could credit, like, it's all civics.
It is all civics.
It's all civics.
You want my beautiful analogy that I offered to high schoolers a couple weeks ago, and middle schoolers as well, at our mikvah challenge, which I asked them all how many have eaten bread in their life, and every hand went up, right? And I said, and how many thought of the ingredients of bread every time they eat it or regularly?
Right.
And like maybe an eighth of the hands
One poor little gluten-free.
That's me. Or the sourdough making mother that, has asked their child to, as Heather would say, prep the dough or whatever that may be, you know, so the person who gets pulled into that. But that's our civic system. There's so many, we're consuming it every single day, but rarely are we thinking of the multitude of ingredients that go into it. And if we want to go down this path a little bit more, we also have to recognize that, like, not only do we have to be aware that it's pretty simple ingredients to make bread, and it's again the same with our civic system, but like we also have to think about, Andy, how those ingredients even came to be.
Right.
And I think that we're also in a kind of a interesting point in American history right now where we're being a little bit more honest about those factors that have made it feel like certain people belong in our civic structures and certain don't. And that's my own personal passion, is that I do not like the exclusionary nature of some of our civic structures and the amount of money that it takes. So I want to show people that their voice matters, their engagement matters, and I want to start that as young as we possibly can.
Yeah.
Because, if you don't, we'll just use our beautiful wheat, right? Like, even though I can't eat the stuff, but, or rice or whatever, like you still needed someone to get that to create the flour that you need for your bread. You still need to clean water. You still need, and there's a lot of people who are engaging to make sure your water is clean so you can make your bread too. So again, there's like so much history to our civic system, but if you only know the ingredients to make bread, you'll never make bread. So we have to be mindful that civics, we want the knowledge, and also you have to find this place to be able to put the ingredients together.
Yeah. You're making me hungry. This is actually very appropriate because there is a little bit the smell of beer and cider in here. It's all hops. All hops is civics, which is fantastic. It really is the ultimate, like, I can't even think of an analogy that wouldn't be predicated on a civic structure in some way. There's nothing you can think of that would exist other than like a weird little man in the forest eating pine trees or something. Which is
even that, like, there's no point in history. I read this really unnecessary book, but it was called The Dawn of Everything.
Oh, I've heard about that.
It's really aggressive, and it's the longest book I've ever tried to read. I mean, I will say I like move the pages back and forth, but whether I like actually retain some of the information is, to be determined.
Yeah.
But there's like no point in history of all humankind that we've been able to identify a point where we can't say, oh, that's what's civics. That's like a form of a civic system. Because in order to have a civil society, you need a civic structure. So even the person who's like eating pine needles in the woods,
his name's Joe. He lives in Boscawen.
Yeah, likely. I think I know Joe. I've seen him on the rail trail that just got like bulldozed through his town.
Super nice guy.
Yeah. But like Joe's ability to eat the pine needles is most likely because someone like tried to reduce deforestation.
Right. Yeah. No, 100%. And I love, like, it clearly you've thought more critically and more deeply about a lot of these things, particularly civics, than, most people, certainly myself. And it's clear from the way you talk about it. One of the things I like about how you talk about this issue is you really frame it as it's not a zero-sum thing, right? And I think it can be hard, with all the problems that people are exposed to or become aware of. And they say, well, if we take focus away from thing X, we can't put it towards thing Y. And, you're going to belabor another analogy, but you really are in the engine room.
Yeah.
You are in the ship, you're fixing the holes, and we all benefit when more people are educated about how all the instruments of governance and community building around them work. Mm-hmm. No one loses in that situation, except perhaps people who benefit when people don't know what's going on, which is my tinfoil conspiracy. I'm going to shell another compliment to your organization. One of the things that I think is really impressive about New Hampshire Civics is it seems like, at least politically, everyone, or there's a very broad range of support. There's bipartisan support for it. You got the governor involved at some point. You had some input on some law that got passed, right, for civics education.
Absolutely.
Can you talk to me a little bit about the bipartisan support, how that makes you feel, maybe your engagement on the law that got through, and what that's all about? I'd love to hear some of that.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. And I would say that it is a movement. We're connected to larger organizations called iCivics, which kind of has different coalitions across the United States of America. There's the work that we do, the Mikvah Challenge, which again is a national group. And it's so amazing to be a part of something that is truly a movement and to have people excited about this work. And to your point, it is bipartisan. I think that there is this moment where it's not a perfect culture, it's not a perfect environment, but there's that Venn diagram crossover where we can say, absolutely, we are missing an opportunity to ensure that the next 200 years of the United States of America continues. I think 2026 is the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, right? So if we're thinking about what does the next 250 years of the United States look like, if democracy is our chosen model and that's what every single foundational document is based upon, we have to really get back to understanding what a democracy is, because the reality is 70% of people born from basically my generation through your generation through the current do not believe in democracy. Right. So, and I had a meeting earlier today with a colleague at Citizens Count, and I was like, we use the word good and better interchangeably, but they're not. Right. And so democracy has a long way to go in the United States to be good, but it certainly is better than some of the other models of government that we have seen across the globe. Doesn't mean there isn't chance to re-review that, but we have a lot of people who are excited about and committed to, from all kind of ideologies, to reminding ourselves of what a democracy is.
No, I so many great points there. I think about this stuff, maybe not all the time, because you literally think about it all the time. But no, I mean, I do think there is a kind of messaging. I mean, I'm not going to distill some of the ills that face democratic societies today down to like it's a marketing problem, but maybe it kind of is, right? I mean, I would wager or wonder if people responding to a survey or statistically say, oh, well, all these people, do you like democracy? And they say, I don't know. I said, well, what do you think of systems where the collective outcome of whatever is decided is, negotiated to be the best thing for all the people involved? Well, that sounds pretty good to me. Like getting pizza with your friends, right? It's like, oh, well, that's what the democratic ideal is. Oh, okay. So I think, and again, it's all education, I mean, I'm just telling you things you already know, but there is so much to love about starting with kids. Because as you say, I mean, it's a long-term thing, you know, and I think it can be easy to lose sight of. I mean, my grandmother like couldn't have a bank account
Right.
on her own,
Absolutely.
which is insane. You know,
Absolutely.
I've met her. You know, I've spent lots of time with both my grandmas, and they're as whole and human and complex as me or you or anyone I've ever met. And the idea that they wouldn't have control over their own money or their own direction in life is like, it's unfathomable
Absolutely.
to someone like me, right? And I think to a lot of people who've grown up in, you know, my generation and, you know, other generations, right? And so there are, that's stuff I like to think about, like that we may disagree on a lot of things, but slowly things have moved in a more welcoming, inclusive direction. And this is a good trajectory.
Absolutely. And I think to your point, Andy, if we looked at just civics in the United States of America, it would look different. It's politics, and people find the two to be synonymous, and they're not.
Yeah.
I could say that, as you've heard probably more times than you ever need to already just in this time, is like the whole two-party system could fall apart tomorrow. We could actually have no political parties whatsoever.
Right.
And we would still need civics. But we see these in, unfortunately, things are becoming more political, but like in small towns
Right.
across New Hampshire, like I don't know what someone's ideology is on the Conservation Commission. I mean, I personally in my own town just got appointed, well, over the winter to our town got that, whatever, that energy conglomerate thing that passed last year where we like the town buys your rates.
Yeah. Oh man, I want to have those people on and they're going to kill me right now. I know what it's called too. It's going to come to me.
It's a law that passed that lets your town say whether you want to
Community power.
Yeah, we have the community
New Hampshire
power.
Community Power Coalition.
Yeah,
something like
absolutely. And so I was a part of that. And across the table from me was James Sununu, which is Chris Sununu's brother.
Yeah.
Right. And so you may think, I don't know if Allison and James Sununu have a lot in common, but it didn't, like, that wasn't the point of why we came together. We came
Right.
together to work to put something out to the voters. That was our responsibility. We were there to make sure that the voters had a voice on an issue that affected them in the town. And we all understood the assignment.
Right.
Right? We didn't try to interject with like, well, you know, and then meanwhile, on the same ballot was putting up a cell tower in our town,
Yeah.
which you would think on paper would be not a big issue.
Right.
Put it out there for the voters, but it became highly political.
Yeah.
And I think like that's the turnoff, right? Like that's the thing that prevents us from even being able to fully actualize. And we saw that from the inception of the United States. You know, when we talk about, I think we know enough now to be able to say that the quote unquote founding fathers grappled with the notion of slavery and the three-quarter, but politics got in the way.
Right.
Right? It wasn't just put a policy out and the people will, but the intention of it, you know, the intention of those documents do not put those limitations in place. It's a
Right.
beautiful example of intention and impact.
Yeah.
Right. And I think personally that I want our youngest peoples in the state and all the way through adulthood to understand that having knowledge is a really incredible power that you do with it what you want. And you don't have to, if you choose not to engage in politics, that's totally fine too. There's a lot of other spaces and places where you'll be needed.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that, you know, those opportunities, whenever they're probably there because of civics. You know, like any avenue you have to make the world a better place or leave your mark on it, it's civics.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think you could say that about everything. Gosh, there's so much. Like my head is just spinning. There's so many things that you're touching on that I think are so great.
That's awesome.
You're like the perfect guest. You're like it's almost like a conspiracy.
It's almost like my mind doesn't stop thinking ever. But I do want to talk on 216 because I think that that's important for people to understand.
That's right. Yeah.
For sure. And I know that I trailed off as I do, but Senate Bill 216. So New Hampshire Civics, we have our core programs. So we like to kind of talk about our buckets, and we have like professional development for educators on how to offer civics education in the classroom. We have these really cool experiential learning opportunities for students to engage through either Kid Governor, MICVA Challenge, or Civics 603. And then we have curriculum library. And then last but certainly not least, we oversee the work of the New Hampshire Civic Learning Coalition. And that group got kind of pulled together right before the pandemic started, so late 2019, and they were working to do and identify some of the gaps. And then someone was like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we kind of worked to make sure that civics education was available for all grades?
Yeah.
And again, like this was Senator Sharon Carson and Senator Lou D'Alessandro co-sponsored a bill in the Senate called Senate Bill 216. And with the time, Senator Jay Kahn worked with them, who was on the Civic Learning Coalition, is on the New Hampshire Civics Board, now Mayor Kahn. And in very short time, this passed. Almost surprised,
Wow.
Sometimes in New Hampshire, there's times where people will put a bill forth for like 20 years and it will never get through.
Yeah.
This was like the first or second time they put this bill through and it passed. And so New Hampshire is really a model across the United States of America right now for, I hate to use the word mandating, but
Yeah.
asking or putting in place specifics around ensuring that we have civics education in K through 12 of all schools. So this is public charter, private school, homeschool. So
Wow.
yeah, so K through 12, our educators of all identities and all types of schooling are seeking to make sure that they're folding civics in. And so it's just really cool that we kind of had this first in the nation history to us.
Yeah.
But I also find that personally in New Hampshire, we aren't often first around a lot of things. We like to see how things work out elsewhere first before we go, for example.
We selectively ascribe to live free or die.
Yeah,
we do in so many ways, but not
Right.
all of them.
It's funny, again, these are just the social issues that I'm aware of, but I'm sure there's a lot more. But obviously, marijuana legalization, where the whole around us is, and we're like, okay, maybe it's okay to explore this now, right? But we like to see how things turn out elsewhere. I think that that's true in a lot of different ways, but this was something that we took a bold action on and had full bipartisan support. It was very, very little pushback or tension using the fear of mandates or things like that. So now it's our responsibility at New Hampshire Civics, the Civic Learning Coalition, and all of us to ensure that our educators have the tools and resources they need to see this through.
Yeah. What I love most about that is, again, you could say rose-colored glasses, or you could say, pragmatic optimism. But the fact that an initiative like that got done with such speed and, it sounds like enthusiasm, right? When people will find, ways to argue about things that you can't even make up because of how strange they might seem to a layperson, to the legislative system, right? I think says something very good and very profound. To me, that says there is a widespread assumption of good faith, in a lot of the people who helped push that across the line in the legislature, right? If they say, well, I believe this and you might believe that, but the one thing we can really, really extraordinarily agree on is that we want our kids to do what we're doing right now better than us, to know more, to be schooled on it better from a younger age, because we believe in the good faith. I don't even know if debate's the right word. We believe in the process of getting together in good faith and, trying to figure out what's best for everybody. And I don't know what else, what else would you want to do? That's what government's supposed to be all about, So I think it's extraordinary that this got done and that your organization really helped lead the way on it. And it's a perfect example of like, wow, what a great story that you would never hear about.
Agreed.
You know?
Agreed. 100%.
Okay. In the time that we have left, I want to ask, what is it like to work with kids or to see how kids learn about these things for the first time? Like, do some parts of civics education come more easily to them, others harder? Like, what are the kids like?
Absolutely. And, you know, I mean, I can speak mostly from our programs that we offer because that's what I've witnessed. And I have a colleague who was at UNH and she does the Child Studies and Development Center. And she just wrote this awesome quote, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't want to ever take someone else's words from them. But I was basically that we are worried or concerned that children can't think critically, but so therefore we don't engage in some of these topics or some of these issues because we're worried it might be too much for them, but that like all of a sudden when they're 18 they should just have this knowledge available to them.
Yeah.
But when you see the kids participating in our New Hampshire Civics program, so I'll just hold up kind of the two that are standing out to me right now, which is our MICVA Challenge, which is a national program that we're happy to offer through New Hampshire Civics here. It gives, so the point of the MICVA Challenge is for students to get up on stage, and they call it the soapbox, and to talk about an issue that matters to them.
Yeah.
And so a couple weeks ago, we had our showcase, and never in my life, Andy, have I been in a kind of culture that this was, which was students from all across the state. So it was middle schoolers through high schoolers. They never met each other before. They had 6 topics that they could pick from that mattered to them. So they had mental health, they had education, they had healthcare, they had criminal justice, they had bullying. And for the meeting each other the first time, they picked their topic, they went off into a room and put together a presentation over 2 hours to present to a group of, we call them civic partners, who are kind of already in the field themselves on what their thoughts were on that issue.
Wow.
And 2 things stuck out to me. One was the fact that here are on stage was a 7th grader from Ware and a senior from Groveton.
Right.
On stage talking about how our healthcare system, it isn't about getting more workers. It's about wanting to retain, like changing culture of our healthcare system so that people will actually want to work in it.
And this kid's like 13.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right. So here we have this like cognitive dissonance of like the notion that like people, you know, younger people can't think critically. And then when we give them the chance, like they just offer these beautiful solutions that are so beyond what I see from, you know, standing people in policy sometimes, not all the time, but the fact that they can just was remarkable to me. And then when I do our Kid Governor program, which is 5th graders, they have to present a video and they have to put things together. And we had, a national get together with all the Kid Governor programs across the country. And they had our student who was in Gorham. She's on the executive council here. And here she is concerned about her classroom supplies for her teachers. So she's putting together like a whole drive and going out and talking to it about community members and talking about the issues that our educators are having about having to buy supplies. And she's in 5th grade. Like once you give them the opportunity and you don't have to sit there and criticize them or downplay them, you just see how often they're thinking about the things. It just looks different for them, you know, like to your point, like they're not going out and grabbing, you know, pizza and beer at Treeline Brewery, but they are thinking about these things all the time, but just maybe not given the space to express that because there's a lot of other things that have to get done in a classroom or during a school day.
Right. Yeah. So. And I feel like kids are totally capable of complex self-organizing, you know. I mean, if anyone says kids aren't smart or complicated, like you go onto the playground, you know, and you find someone with the whatever card game is being sold right now, like Yu-Gi-Oh or Pokemon or whatever, and you will discover a very finely tuned, complicated marketplace, you know, with all these factors of, well, it's, you know, a Tuesday and we don't play on Tuesdays because it's dodgeball, and, you know, Susie got the new pack, but the rare card wasn't there, so I traded her 3, you know, hot dog pieces. Like, kids are so ingenious.
Absolutely.
You know, and kind of like you say, some of that, I think a lot of the time is that they'll see simple solutions to problems that we've become mired in because it hasn't been explained to them yet that it's not possible.
Right.
That, no, you can't do that. Like, I don't know. I mean, I'm like preaching to you. I feel like everyone is born an optimist, and then things happen to them
Absolutely
along the way and, you know, whatnot. But I feel like every time I interact with a kid, I'm like, wow, you're way smarter than me. Or when I was, oh gosh.
And it's the ability that they can like flip back and forth. And I think that's what we can learn a lot from kids. You know, I mean, I remember they asked a presenter at that Kid Governor National program, like, this person worked for the Governors Association or whatever. So there was like multi-partisan viewpoints. And she said, well, you know, we can be around a table talking about some hot button issues. And then like we go train for our half marathon together. And the students were like, yeah, that's like when we're in the classroom and like, maybe I'm upset that I didn't get picked to do that project or to have that particular tool in the classroom, but whatever, I'll just go out and at recess, I'm gonna sit with so-and-so at lunchtime. Right. And so they're already doing the things that we as adults, quote unquote adults, have to really be conscious of, because it's like, oh, you shouldn't go talk to that person now because they got the thing that you wanted, and you should be upset at them and you shouldn't engage with them, you know? And I guess lastly is I personally feel like I'm pretty aware of civic issues, Andy, but at the same time, I'm just finishing reading a book right now. I won't name the name, but I was talking about our Congress, and I was literally shocked out of my mind that they don't talk to each other at all. Senate is different, but Congress do not talk to each other. And unfortunately, I remember when I was doing work with Leadership New Hampshire, people would always talk about this very, I don't know, definitely long before my time hotel that existed where like Uno's and L.O. Bean does now. And all the people would like stay there who would come from across the state for hearings, because they didn't want to just keep traveling back and forth if they were in a faraway place. And they were like, things were just so much more human. We were so much more human centered because we would go grab dinner together after, you know? And so I am worried, and what I want to make sure that New Hampshire Civics does continue to do is encourage cohesiveness and encourage humanity and encourage collective understanding of each other. And again, like the word understanding gets conflated with agreement, just like the word better gets conflated with good.
Oh, yeah.
But both, they're separate. They're all separate, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's a really great point to make. You know, I knew once a gentleman who, he came and talked to a class of ours in college, and he had some role in helping organize, you know, like thousands of people, the Paris Climate Accords in 2016 or 15 or whatnot. And, you know, he said something exactly like you just said. He basically said, you know, this time it went really well. We were able to, you know, get a lot more done, and we were able to set more aggressive targets that, you know, people were happy with. And he basically said, a lot of that, in my opinion, because I've been to these, you know, COP things before, and it doesn't always go great. It was just the design of it, the way, like, they would build in, you know, more breaks or something, or like more time for people to interact in ways that, again, were more human. That's not like, hey, you just got here off a plane from Malaysia, you get 20 minutes and you're going to be negotiating with, you know, 7 other countries, right? Like, just having a little more of a, I mean, again, I don't actually know the details of it, but, you know, kind of like how they do orientation,
right?
You know, in college or every other thing you can think of, because it works really well,
right?
You know, and just I like that perspective a lot, right? Because I think it implies that so many more of these things are solvable with a little more understanding and empathy, right? And you're just dosing up the kiddos
Absolutely.
from day one with that stuff, which is so great.
Well, it just struck me when you're saying that, Andy, because I'm realizing that I don't think kids like to check a box.
No, I don't think they do.
You know, and I wonder, I'm just thinking, sitting here right now, wondering at what point do you move into just being so checked out that you just want to check a box. And
Yeah.
like, if a kid's going to give their energy to something, I mean, that's not a perfect science, but it's like, I think sometimes that's why it's hard to even get kids to like, or younger people to like clean a room, you know what I'm saying? Because they want to do it intentionally. And so like,
Right.
but then they just get frustrated by getting nagged. So they may move to just like, you know, putting their laundry basket in their closet and shutting the door
Yeah.
and just getting it out of. And you learn the value of like, oh, okay, well, it's not in my caregiver's face anymore, so they're not nagging me. So I'll just keep doing this way.
Right.
And so it's like, again, like the importance of all of us, whether that's educators or community members, to ensure that our cultures that we're setting up for them are not okay with just like checking the box, but are literally like, you know, I think of like the TikTok ban that could be happening, like
Sure.
how important it is to hear from young voices about
Yeah.
that, because as someone that grew up in small town New Hampshire, like obviously did not have access to TikTok, but I was kind of coming of the age where we had like beautiful dial up,
Yeah.
super loud whistle throughout the house. Yeah. But how much that like changed me very quickly in a short period of time, being able to like, I don't even remember what the heck the original, like, not the Wikipedia, but the other one that you would go to that was like this. Remember? Like it was.
Before I was Encyclopedia
know.
Britannica, the book.
Yes, I remember there was like
Your
this
friend
like
would have the whole collection,
this
and
like
you'd
site with a globe on it. But you know, I mean, when
Ask
to be able
Jeeves.
to
I remember Ask
oh,
Jeeves.
good old Ask Jeeves.
Yeah.
But like being able to like research papers and touch on a bunch of different things that were beyond like what my little library could offer.
Right. Yeah. And having that information accessible to you in a way that feels easy and
Yeah. You know, getting back to civics life, I guess it's also important to recognize, lastly, is that our, you know, I think it makes my job so fulfilling and it makes it difficult, is getting back to our original point. It is an upstream, and there's
Yeah.
no guarantee of everything we're doing right now is going to make a difference.
Right.
But it's hard to imagine it won't when we see
Yeah.
the way that people and students specifically really get excited about feeling like their voice is heard and they can talk about issues. And I'll just hold up this one last really cool thing, and I'm going to meet with them on Wednesday this week. But the town of Barrington, New Hampshire, had really, really low turnout for their municipal elections, and they were trying to figure out how to get more turnout. And so the town administrator came up with this idea to have an actual election that the people under 18 could participate in, and mostly younger groups even, and they
Right.
vote on what day trick-or-treating is on. They vote on
Nice.
like what their voting sticker is or what the new truck is that they just bought, or,
Yeah.
you know, and it's issues-based development, and their voter turnout went up 50 to 70% depending on what data you use, because the kids were like, oh, I need to go vote to, you know, their parent or their
I'm a
caretaker.
stakeholder in this, right?
Yeah, and but it actually matters. Like I'm used to like the throwaway ballots, and I'm sure you were like vote for the governor, but it didn't matter. Or vote for
Yeah.
the president, but it didn't matter.
Right.
And so like these innovative, cool ways that are cropping up to instill that feeling of what it is like when you see like, oh, well, I strategized and I pitched that trick-or-treating should be on the 30th this year because it's on a Friday night. And I know a lot of people are busy during the weekends, but I know also it's harder for caretakers to get home, maybe on a Tuesday or whatever. So
Yeah.
we like chose a Friday night, even if it wasn't, you know, the 30th or 31st, whatever. They had to like critically think through the issue.
Right. Or even, I mean, trick-or-treating itself is another example of, and it can be an incredibly complicated, you know, like SEAL Team 6 or whatever would be proud of some of the trick-or-treating plans that, you know, I've seen kids and teens make, and that I remember they'd be like, all right, we got 20 houses to cover. You go that way, you go this way. If we cut through the, like, it's just crazy. You give kids
Absolutely.
any opportunity, they'll think of things that are more complex than you can imagine.
But they may listen and be like, oh, it's not fair because it's only one night away from the town of Durham, and the town of Durham kids come over to Barrington, and so
Right.
it's a lot for the people
they'll
who live
think of
here,
them, right.
and so let's do it 3 days later,
Yeah.
but just so cool and so beautiful to think if you're having that thought process at 7, 8, 9, 10, 11,
Yeah.
how much we have to work hard to derail that by the time you're 18, 19, 20,
right.
30, 50 to
Yeah.
take that away.
Right. It's not natural.
Right.
They don't I so agree with you. But how cool though, right? Soon. And I wonder how close, so what are the youngest kids that you work with now? Is it 5th grade, or is it it's just like K through?
So the youngest age we have for one of our experiential learning opportunities is 5th grade.
Okay.
We promote at New Hampshire Civics K through 12.
Right.
So we certainly hope to, as we keep kind of advancing along, to have more opportunities for K through 3 students. But our baseline or starting age is 5th grade.
Yeah. So you haven't yet had the opportunity to see, hey, we touched this kid in 5th grade, or this group of kids, and then we now see, a decade later when they're of voting age, that impact hasn't quite been felt yet, right?
Correct. Yeah, it'd be tight. I mean, it is funny how our Kid Governor program, it's only been around, well, not only, but it's been, 4 or 5 years at this point. And it started off pretty small. So
Right.
It'll be interesting. So 5th grade now, and so they are starting to get into high school, and to see what that looks like, it will be really interesting. And I think there was this study that someone just sent to me that was essentially that they had a long-term study for students exposed to voting or to engaging in stuff in preschool,
Yeah.
and the impact that had on them when they were 18, 19, 20, and they didn't leave their home where they grew up as much, because that's
Right.
the other thing that we're kind of facing for a challenge is our
sure.
culture has people moving to where they feel like they'll be more ideologically aligned rather
Yeah.
than staying where they are and working to build community and to build understanding around issues.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's another great. We could have a whole podcast. Well, I am going to hopefully interview the people from Stay Work Play.
perfect.
To know all about that.
Yes.
Forgive me if this is not right, but what I love about your org, probably more than anything, is that the sense of optimism it's built into it. Kind of because of that. You aren't really going to appreciate or see the impact of what you're doing, for a long time.
Yeah.
But the longer it goes on, it's going to appreciate over time. 10 kids, 20 kids, 100 kids, 1,000 kids, right?
Yeah.
Who got this great civics experience.
Absolutely.
20 years from now, that's going to be massive. And again, for all the short-term thinking that people have today of, kind of crisis jumping from one thing to another, right? You're there in the engine room, doing the long-term work. Is that, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that something that makes you feel optimistic? Tell me
Absolutely.
about that.
I mean, I think, as I said earlier, Andy, we are at a crossroads about a lot of things in our country right now, and that's okay. That's growing pains. That's things that happen.
Yeah.
But I think what makes me most happy is kind of what you were touching on before, is the fact that we could have just thrown in the towel, given up hope, said, we're too far past this at this point. We shouldn't even bother trying to circle back and to get back to our youngest members of our society and help them
Right.
have the tools that they need to engage if they wish to. Again, none of our work at New Hampshire Civics is mandated or requiring anyone to do anything. And my weird Allison analogy, part 35, is we as a culture will say, yes, every person should know how to do CPR, or every young kid should know to call 911, or every, person who's age 13 and up can use an AED, should know how to use an AED. These are basic skills in life.
Right.
And what I hope New Hampshire Civics and our work in the state and across the country continue to do is is create that same cultural mindset. Like, what is the basic things that we agree that every kiddo or young adult should know about our civic structure? But it doesn't mean everyone who knows how to use an AED is going to go into the medical field. It doesn't mean everyone who's doing this is going to want to actively engage in our civic system, but they will have the tools available to them. And I think that that's just beautiful that our society decided, no, we're not ready to give up on this yet. Yeah. Actually, let's turn back and reinvest. And the only thing I can hope for, and I feel like we will get there, is the patience to give it time to see it play out. Yeah. Because we've committed to this. We want to see this through.
Right.
So let's invest and let's put our time and energy and truthfully patience into giving our students and our kids a chance to develop the skills and to figure out how they want to apply them.
Right.
And not put pressure and not put expectations around it, but to let them kind of unfold in their own way. And I have just tremendous hope and belief that in 15 years, when we come back, sit down here at Treeline Outfitters for a 15-year follow-up, that we're going to say, like, wow, look at what voter turnout is. Look at kind of the hard conversations we're able to have with each other. Look at the ways that our society has shifted in these last 15 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I love everything you just said. Because I feel like it would be easy for someone to be dismissive. Normally when people talk about doing anything with kids, right? Like, oh, I do acts for kids. Like I go visit sick kids or something. Like, not that isn't great. Not that it's not fantastic, necessary, honorable work to do things with children. And not that you're not having a great impact today. It's like, what's the impact? We gave 11-year-old kid some really great exposure to civics ideals today. We did that today, right? That's great. But so is, you're deadly serious about, 15, 20, 30 years from now, that this is a pragmatic and necessary and actually really clever approach to, bringing more civic engagement to the United States writ large, to New Hampshire, who, as you point out, we have this kind of unique storied history,
yes.
With for a bunch of reasons, but, yeah, so I love everything about that. I love that. It's like, oh yeah, it's just for kids, but like, kids are the future.
100%. 100%. And kids learn from adults.
Right.
So we all need to also find ways and places and spaces. Because again, going back to like, it's not a one and done thing. So if you have young people in your life, like, talk to them, engage with them, and and don't try to like say, oh, this should be this way or that way. Like, try to keep an open mind and listen to each other. And it's been awesome to be able to talk with you about New Hampshire civics, Andy. And I would say that when I think about ultimately the reality of the time we're in, usually these things are economically motivated.
Right.
I don't think our civic structures are things that people think about that are like, oh, this is, and again, not to take away from STEM or other efforts like that, but their motivation for investment was to make sure that we have a really solid workforce, know? Right. And once again, we as a nation and we as a state and we as communities hopefully are saying, yeah, we're not taking away from our economic system, but we need our civic system to make that even reach its full potential. And so again, this isn't going to make millions upon millions of dollars, but without civics, I think New Hampshire falls apart. I mean, we have a 400-person legislature. My town alone, we have 2 different school boards you can run for. I mean, if we don't have people engaging in issues or turning out or caring, I was really sad about what was going to happen to the state. But the more I get involved with New Hampshire civics, the more I see, the more hope I have for our future here in the state.
Yeah. Well, it's also what we have, a lot to lose, but what we stand to gain.
Absolutely.
I was talking to a friend about this the other day, and we were kind of like joking, but making a kind of serious point about, if imagine you're in a sandbox, but you're designing an entire civilization and way of life, right? And if you really want like everything all firing on all cylinders, you want people innovating and, living life to their fullest abilities and, doing everything that they want to be doing, right? Like the way to do that would not be to, categorically deny opportunities to, half your population or, people who look or love in a particular way. Like that's like trying to do anything on hard mode, and it's like, what a stupid way to run anything. So I totally agree. Of like, if we're serious about making the world a better place or making, the United States or New Hampshire a better place, like we need as many people as we can informed about the structures around them and to be interested in engaging with them.
Absolutely.
Like that is, it's part of the deal. We need it. It's not a nice to have. Because there's so much. Gosh, I could talk to you forever, Allison. But we've been going for an hour and 8 now.
Perfect.
I promised you that would be probably 20 minutes less than that.
We're good.
Yeah.
No one ever gets out of 20 minutes of conversation with me, Andy. So
That's right. We're trapped here in the elevator for 70 minutes of civics conversation. Well, thank you so much, Allison. I would love to have you on again.
absolutely.
Hopefully not 15 years from now. Sooner than that would be nice. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. I really appreciate it.
Hey there. Thanks for spending some time with us, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation. You can learn more about today's guest and how to get involved with or support their work in the show notes. If you'd like to suggest a guest for the show or have any story tips for our Good News in New Hampshire newsletter, shoot me a message at hello@granitegoodness.com. Music for this episode was provided by the band Sneaky Miles, who hail from Newmarket, New Hampshire. Recording space was provided by Treeline Outfitters in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Until next time, I'm the creator of Granite Goodness and the host of the Granite Goodness podcast, Andy DeMeo. Thanks for listening.